Imagine you're 6 months pregnant, your belly swollen so tight it hurts with every breath, your feet so swollen you can barely take a step, and all you've eaten today is half a can of cheap generic beans. Then suddenly the man you once loved with your whole heart, the man you gave up, everything for, stands in front of 800 wealthy guests, laughs out loud and announces to the entire world, "Look at her, the piece of trash I married back when I had nothing. A pathetic little nobody from the South Side who actually thought she could climb up. But now, she's just a burden. A mistake I'm finally correcting." Then he turns to his new lover, the woman in the stunning red gown, and gives her the signal. She smiles with delight, plunges both hands deep into the towering birthday cake, and smashes a massive handful straight into your face. Thick white frosting coats your hair, stings your eyes, drips down your chest, and slides over your pregnant belly. The entire ballroom explodes in laughter. Phones shoot up everywhere. Camera flashes burst like gunfire. Not one single person reaches out to help you up. This isn't a horror movie. This is exactly what happened to Elena Moretti on a freezing October night in Chicago in 2025. Right before the brother she had once sworn she would never see again stepped through the doors and decided he would burn the entire city to ashes to deliver her justice. Do you dare to hear the rest of a story that even the people who lived through it can hardly believe is real? Before we dive into this chilling and mysterious story, please remember to subscribe to the channel Alex Truths and like this. Adio. Every subscription, like, and share from you is a huge spiritual gift and an incredibly profound source of motivation for the channel's growth, so we can continue bringing wonderful videos every day to everyone. There would be no greater joy than receiving your love and support through the comments you leave right below this video. Comments sharing your emotions or telling us which province or city you're living and working in while listening to this story. Alright, let's continue together and immerse ourselves in this amazing, captivating story that's filled with deep emotions. October 2025, Chicago. The wind off Lake Michigan carried the kind of late autumn bite that sliced straight through thin coats and thinner hope. I stood at the edge of the Grand Lakeside Ballroom's private terrace, clutching the frayed hem of my only decent dress, a second-hand navy polyester thing I'd found at the Goodwill on Halsted for $12. The fabric was too thin for the cold, and the hem had started to unravel after too many hand washes in the laundromat sink. My shoes were the same black flats I'd worn to every job interview for the last 3 years. Heels worn down to nothing, soles cracked like old asphalt. My belly swollen at 6 months, pressed painfully against the cheap zipper. I hadn't eaten since yesterday's half can of generic beans. Hunger was an old friend now. It lived inside me like a second heartbeat. The birthday party was for Vincent Russo's mother, Mrs. Carmela Russo, 70 years old, still sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, the matriarch of a family that had climbed from Little Italy tenements to Gold Coast penthouses. 800 guests filled the ballroom behind me. Men in tailored tuxedos that cost more than I'd earned in a decade. Women whose diamonds caught the chandelier light like small, cruel stars. Champagne flowed in endless rivers. Trays of shrimp the size of my thumb passed by, untouched by people who could afford to leave them. I had taken one earlier, just one when no one was looking. My fingers still smelled faintly of lemon butter. Vincent Vinny, as everyone called him, had insisted I come. It's family, he'd said that morning in our rented 2-bedroom walk-up on the south side, the one with the cracked ceiling and the radiator that hissed like a dying snake. You're carrying my son. You belong here. I had wanted to believe him. I always wanted to believe him. Now I stood on the terrace, watching the city lights smear across the black water, trying to breathe through the nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness anymore. My ankles were so swollen I could barely feel my feet. My back ached in a deep, constant way that no amount of leaning against the railing could ease. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours in a row for weeks. The shelter I'd lived in before Vinny had taken me in had been freezing. The nights on the street before that had been worse. Whined through cardboard rats skittering over my legs, the constant fear that someone would steal the last thing I owned, a photograph of my mother, faded and creased, taken when I was 6. I still carried it in my bra because I had no purse. The double doors behind me opened. Vinny stepped out handsome in his charcoal suit, fair skin flushed from wine and triumph. His hair was perfectly combed, his cufflinks glinting like tiny blades. Behind him came Sophia, tall, polished, her red gown clinging to curves that had never known hunger. She carried a glass of champagne in one hand and a smile that felt like a slap. "There you are," Vinny said, voice loud enough for the nearest tables to hear. "Everyone's been asking about my little wife." I tried to smile. My lips trembled. I just needed air. He laughed, sharp, theatrical. "Air, you've been hiding out here like a stray cat. Come inside. Mom wants to see the mother of her grandson." The ballroom swallowed me again. The heat hit like a wall. Music pulsed under 1,000 conversations. Heads turned. Whispers followed. I knew what they saw. A thin, pale woman with hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a cheap elastic because I couldn't afford a proper clip. A woman who didn't belong. Vinny led me to the center of the room, where the cake waited, a towering 4-tier masterpiece frosted in ivory and gold, studded with sugar roses and tiny American flags. 70 candles burned in a perfect ring. Mrs. Russo sat at the head table, her silver hair gleaming, her smile brittle. Vinny raised his glass. The room quieted. To my mother he began, the woman who taught me everything, and to my wife. He paused, looked at me, and something cold flickered in his eyes. Who taught me how far a man can fall before he climbs back up. Laughter rippled. Not kind laughter, the kind that knows it's safe to be cruel. He turned to Sophia. Darling, why don't you do the honors? Cut the cake for the birthday girl. Sophia's smile widened. She stepped forward, lifted the silver server, then without warning plunged both hands into the top tier. Frosting smeared up her wrists. She scooped a massive handful of cake and icing, turned and smashed it directly into my face. The impact stunned me. Cold sweetness coated my cheeks, my nose, my closed eyes. I gasped, inhaled, sugar choked. The second handful hit my chest, sliding down the front of my dress in thick, humiliating clumps. My hands flew to my belly, instinctively shielding the baby from the mess, from the laughter that exploded around us. I staggered back one step. My heel caught on the edge of the carpet. I almost fell. The room spun chandeliers, blurring into halos of light, faces melting into smears of red lipstick and white teeth. Vinny laughed loudest of all. Look at her, he said, voice carrying over the roar. Look at what I married when I had nothing. A poor little thing from the South Side who thought she could keep up. Thought she could be something. But she's just this. He gestured at me, at the cake dripping from my chin, at the dress now ruined beyond saving, at the swollen belly that made every breath hurt. A burden. A mistake. I'm finally correcting. Someone clapped. Someone else whistled. Phones came out. Flashes popped like gunfire. I couldn't breathe. My heart slammed so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. The baby kicked hard, frantic, as if he could feel the shame pouring over us both. Frosting stung my eyes. I blinked, tears mixing with sugar running down my neck in sticky rivers. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to open and swallow me. I wanted my mother, dead 12 years now, to hold me and tell me it wasn't true. Instead, I stood there, trembling arms wrapped around my middle, listening to 800 wealthy strangers laugh at the destitute woman who had dared to love their golden boy. Vinny leaned close, breath hot against my ear. You were useful once, he whispered. You typed my first contracts. You answered phones when I had no secretary. You smiled at investors when I couldn't afford suits. But usefulness has an expiration date, sweetheart, and yours just ran out. He straightened, raised his glass again. To new beginnings. The room cheered. I felt my legs give. I sank to my knees slowly, gracelessly, cake and frosting pooling around me on the marble. My hands shook so badly I couldn't wipe my face. Numbness crept up from my toes. The laughter became a dull roar in my ears, distant and unreal. Through the blur, I saw Mrs. Russo watching. Her lips were pressed thin. Her eyes were unreadable. She did not move to help me. No one did. I closed my eyes, willing the darkness to take me to end this moment forever. Somewhere far away, beyond the laughter, beyond the lights, beyond the shame, a black Escalade idled at the curb. Inside, a man with fair skin and storm-gray eyes watched the live feed on his phone. His jaw clenched so hard the muscle jumped. His fingers curled into fists until the knuckles turned white. Luca Moretti had not seen his baby sister in 5 years, but tonight he would burn the city down before he let her suffer another second. The laughter still echoed in my skull long after it had died in the ballroom. It lived inside me now, a low, constant hum that matched the frantic beating of my heart and the restless kicks of the child growing beneath my ribs. I knelt there on the cold marble cake smeared across my face, my chest, my arms, like some broken statue no one wanted to touch. Frosting clung to my eyelashes. Every breath pulled in sugar and shame. No one helped me up. Not Vinny. Not his mother. Not the waiters who stepped around the mess, as if I were a spill to be mopped later. Phone stayed raised red, recording lights glowing like tiny accusing eyes. I could feel them burning into me, cataloging every tremble, every tear that cut clean tracks through the white icing. Slowly, because my body had forgotten how to move without pain, I pushed myself to my feet. My legs shook. The room tilted. I reached out blindly, fingers brushing the edge of a linen-covered table. A champagne flute tipped and shattered at my feet. The sound was small, insignificant against the roar in my head, but it felt like the final crack in whatever dignity I had left. I walked. Not gracefully. not with my head high. I shuffled head down, arms wrapped tight around my middle, through a sea of people who parted like water around something diseased. My flats squelched with frosting. Each step left a sticky footprint behind me. I could hear the whispers follow. Poor thing. Did you see her face? She actually thought he loved her. How pathetic. I reached the terrace doors, pushed them open with both palms. The October wind hit me like a slap, sharp, merciless, the same wind that had torn through the thin blanket I'd once wrapped around myself on the south side L tracks when the shelters were full. I welcomed it. The cold was honest. The cold didn't pretend. I leaned against the stone balustrade, staring down at the black water far below. My reflection stared back, ghostly, smeared a woman who looked 20 years older than her 28 years. My cheeks were sunken. My collarbones stood out like broken wings. My hair, once thick and dark like Mama's, hung in limp strands around my face. Malnutrition had carved me hollow. Sleep deprivation had painted purple bruises beneath my eyes. I hadn't eaten a full meal in 3 days, only the half sandwich Vinny had left on the counter the night before last and the single shrimp I'd stolen tonight. I pressed my forehead to the cold stone and let the tears come. They came quietly at first, then harder, shaking my whole body. I cried for the girl who had once believed in fairy tales. I cried for the nights I'd slept on benches in Grant Park because the landlord had changed the locks. I cried for the day I'd sold Mama's gold cross necklace, the only thing she'd left me, for $47, so I could buy prenatal vitamins. I cried because I had believed Vincent Russo when he said I was enough, when he said he'd take care of me, when he said the baby would change everything. I had cut my brothers out of my life for him. 5 years ago, standing in the kitchen of the old brownstone on Taylor Street, I'd looked Luca in the eye. My oldest brother, the one who had raised me after our parents died, and told him I didn't need him. Didn't need Marco either. Didn't need the money, the protection, the shadow they cast over every part of my life. You're suffocating me, I'd said, voice shaking. You think I can't stand on my own. You think I'm weak. Luca had looked at me like I'd stabbed him. Marco had turned away, fists clenched. I remembered the silence after I left, the way the front door had closed behind me with a soft final click. I had chosen Vinny instead. A man who had been nothing when we met, just another dreamer with big talk and empty pockets. I had typed his business plans on a borrowed library computer. I had smiled at his first investors when he couldn't afford a suit that fit. I had believed every promise. And now I stood here, covered in cake, carrying his son utterly alone. The wind whipped harder. My teeth chattered. I hugged myself tighter, trying to hold the pieces together. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if trying to remind me he was still here. Still mine. I pressed my palm to the swell of my belly and whispered, "I'm sorry, little one. I'm so sorry." I didn't know how long I stood there. Minutes. Hours. Time had lost meaning. My fingers were numb. My face stung from sugar and salt and cold. Then I heard it low, distant, the sound of tires on wet pavement. A deep engine growl. 2 black Escalades pulled up to the curb below lights-off windows, tinted so dark they swallowed the street lamps. My heart stuttered. I knew those vehicles. I had grown up riding in them. I had sworn I would never ride in them again. The passenger door of the lead car opened. Marco stepped out first, broad shoulders, dark coat eyes, scanning the street like a predator. Then the driver's door. Luca. Even from this distance, even through the haze of tears and humiliation, I recognized him instantly. Fair skin catching the glow of the hotel marquee. Jaw set. Eyes burning with something I couldn't name from here. He looked up, straight at me. Our gazes locked across the 30-foot drop. The world narrowed to that single point of connection. Everything else, the laughter, the cake, the wind, the shame, faded to a dull roar. Luca's face. God, his face. It was the same face that had kissed my scraped knees when I was 7. The same face that had read me bedtime stories when nightmares came. The same face that had stood frozen in the kitchen 5 years ago when I told him I was leaving. But now it was different. Harder. Older. Carved by years of power and choices I had refused to understand. And beneath that hardness, beneath the wealth, the control, the danger, something raw flickered. Something that looked like pain. Something that looked like guilt. He didn't move. Neither did I. Then Marco touched his shoulder. Luca tore his gaze from mine, gave a single sharp nod. They started toward the entrance. My knees buckled. I slid down the balustrade until I was sitting on the freezing stone terrace, back pressed to the wall, arms wrapped around my knees as best I could around the swell of my belly. My breath came in shallow gasps. My mind spun. They were coming. After 5 years of silence. After I had screamed at them to stay away. After I had changed my number, blocked their emails, told them I never wanted to see them again. They were coming anyway. I didn't know whether to feel terror or relief. Both crashed through me at once, violent tearing impossible to separate. Part of me wanted to run, to slip out a side exit, disappear into the city, the way I had so many times before, sleeping on trains, hiding in doorways, surviving on nothing, because nothing was safer than owing anyone anything. Another part, the part that was so tired, so broken, so hungry, wanted to stay exactly where I was, wanted to let them find me, wanted God help me to be carried. I pressed my forehead to my knees and whispered into the dark, "Please, don't hate me." The wind answered with another gust, carrying the faint sound of the ballroom doors opening again. Footsteps. Heavy, purposeful, coming closer. I didn't look up. I couldn't. I was too afraid of what I would see in Luca's eyes, whether it would be anger or pity or something worse, something that might finally shatter what little was left of me. The terrace doors burst open with a sound like thunder breaking glass. The wind rushed in behind them, carrying the sharp scent of lake water and expensive cologne. I didn't lift my head. I couldn't. My body had locked itself into place, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around my middle face, buried against the sticky ruin of my dress. Every muscle screamed with exhaustion. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. Footsteps, not the hurried, polite shuffle of waitstaff or curious guests. These were deliberate, heavy, the kind of steps that knew the world would move aside for them. I felt the air change before I saw anything. The terrace suddenly felt smaller, the wind quieter, as though even nature held its breath. Then a voice, low, rough, familiar in a way that sliced straight through 5 years of silence. "Elena." My name in Luca's mouth sounded like both a prayer and a wound. I squeezed my eyes tighter. My throat closed. Tears burned fresh paths through the drying frosting on my cheeks. I wanted to disappear into the stone beneath me. I wanted to run. I wanted to crawl into his arms and never let go. All at once, all tearing me in different directions. Another set of footsteps. Marco's stopped just behind the first. No one spoke for a long moment. The only sounds were the distant hum of the city below, the soft lap of waves against the pier, and my own ragged breathing. Then Luca moved. I heard the rustle of fine wool as he crouched in front of me, felt the warmth of his presence before I felt his touch. When his fingers, careful and possibly gentle, lifted my chin, I flinched anyway. My eyes opened against my will. Luca Moretti knelt on the cold terrace stone in a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than every piece of clothing I had ever owned combined. His fair skin was paler than I remembered, almost luminous under the terrace lights. His gray eyes, storm-dark, bottomless, were locked on mine with an intensity that made my stomach lurch. For one suspended heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then something in his face shattered. I saw it happen, the crack in the armor he had spent years forging, the flicker of raw, bleeding remorse, the violent twist of guilt that made the muscle in his jaw jump. His hand trembled where it cupped my cheek only a little, but enough that I felt it. "Jesus," he whispered. The word cracked in half. "Look at you." I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but nothing came out. His thumb brushed away, a tear mixed with frosting. The gesture was so tender it hurt worse than the humiliation inside. Behind him, Marco stood like a sentinel, broad, silent, arms crossed, but his eyes were wet. He looked at me like I was a ghost he had spent years searching for. Luca's gaze dropped to the swell of my belly, to the cake still smeared across the front of my dress, to the thinness of my wrists, the hollows of my collarbones, the way my whole body trembled from cold and hunger and shame. His expression twisted, something dark and murderous flashing through the grief. He exhaled slow and ragged as though breathing hurt. "I should have come sooner," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I should have broken down every door you locked. I should have dragged you home the day you left." I shook my head, small, frantic. "I told you to stay away. You were 23, he said, and the words came out like broken glass. "You were grieving. You were angry. And I let you go because I thought giving you space was love." His fingers tightened just slightly on my face. It wasn't. The confession hung between us, heavy and bleeding. I stared at him, chest heaving. Suspicion warred with something deeper, something I hadn't let myself feel in years. Hope. Dangerous, stupid hope. Another gust of wind whipped across the terrace. My teeth chattered so hard I bit my tongue. Luca noticed immediately. Without a word, he shrugged out of his overcoat, thick cashmere lined in silk, and draped it around my shoulders. The warmth hit me like a physical blow. It smelled of him, cedar leather, the faint smoke of expensive cigars he still smoked when he thought no one was watching. It smelled like childhood, like the coat he'd wrapped me in after nightmares, like the blanket he'd tucked around me when I fell asleep on the couch during late-night movies. I clutched it tighter. My knuckles went white against the dark fabric. Luca's eyes never left mine. "I'm taking you out of here," he said. Not a question, a fact. Panic spiked through me, sharp, sudden. "I can't," I whispered. My voice was small, cracked, the voice of a girl who had spent too many nights asking for help and receiving nothing. "Vinny. The baby. People will see." "Let them see," Luca said, and something lethal moved behind his eyes. "Let every single one of them see what happens when you touch what's mine." The word mine landed like a spark on dry tinder. My heart slammed against my ribs. Heat flooded my face, my neck, my chest. I didn't understand it. I didn't want to understand it, but it was there, burning, undeniable. Luca saw it. I knew he did. His pupils dilated. His breath caught just for a second. Then he forced himself to look away, jaw clenched so hard I heard his teeth grind. Marco cleared his throat softly. "Boss, we've got company." Luca's head snapped up. At the far end of the terrace near the glass doors, 3 men in dark suits stood watching. I recognized the type low-level players from the West Side crew, the ones who had always resented the Moretti's hold on the city. One of them, tall, scarred, smirking, held a phone up, clearly recording. Luca stood slowly, every movement deliberate, controlled, but I saw the storm beneath. He glanced down at me once, only once, and the look he gave me was so fierce, so protective, so full of unspoken things that my breath stopped. "Stay here," he murmured. "Don't move." Then he turned. The wind caught his shirt, outlining the powerful lines of his back, the way years of power and violence had carved him into something both beautiful and terrifying. He walked toward the 3 men. They straightened, smirking, widening. I watched, frozen heart in my throat. Luca stopped 5 feet away. The scarred one spoke first. "Didn't know you made house calls, Moretti. Thought you sent your dogs for this kind of cleanup." Luca didn't answer. He simply reached into his pocket, slow, deliberate, and pulled out his phone. Dialed a single number. The scarred man laughed. "What, gonna call your lawyer?" Luca lifted the phone to his ear. "Rossi Tower Security," he said quietly. "This is Luca Moretti. I want the West Terrace cameras looped for the next 15 minutes. And send 2 teams to the loading dock." Quietly, he ended the call. The scarred man's smile faltered. Luca stepped closer, only 1 step. "You have exactly 30 seconds, he said, voice calm, almost gentle, to delete that video and walk away. "If you don't, I will ruin you. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight. Your bookie. He'll be paid off by me by sunrise. Your wife. She'll know about the apartment on Michigan Avenue before breakfast. Your kids' college funds. Gone. And when I'm finished, you'll wish I'd just broken your knees instead." Silence. The scarred man swallowed. Luca waited. Then slowly, the man lowered his phone, tapped the screen, deleted the file. The other 2 followed. Luca didn't move until they turned and disappeared back inside. Only then did he exhale. He returned to me in 3 long strides, crouched again. This time he didn't ask. He slid one arm beneath my knees, the other behind my back, and lifted me as though I weighed nothing. I gasped, soft, startled. My arms went around his neck instinctively. His heart hammered against my side, hard, fast, furious. He carried me toward the terrace steps that led down to the private drive. Marco fell in beside us, eyes scanning every shadow. I buried my face in Luca's neck. His pulse thundered beneath my cheek. "I've got you," he whispered against my hair. "I've got you now." And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I believed someone. Luca carried me down the private service stairs as if I were made of glass. One wrong step and I would shatter completely. His arms were steady, but I felt the tremor in them, the way his fingers curled just a fraction tighter every time my body shook with cold or silent sobs. The overcoat he had draped over me swallowed me whole. Its weight felt like the first real protection I had known in years. Silk lining brushed my bare arms. The scent of cedar in him wrapped around me tighter than his hold. Marco walked ahead, a dark silhouette clearing the way. No words passed between the brothers. They didn't need them. After 5 years apart, they still moved like extensions of the same shadow. We emerged into the underground loading dock, dim, echoing, smelling of diesel and wet concrete. 2 black Escalades waited, engines idling so quietly they sounded like sleeping beasts. A 3rd vehicle, unmarked and sleek, sat farther back. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, hands resting near their waists, eyes scanning every corner. Luca didn't pause. He carried me straight to the lead Escalade. Marco opened the rear door without a word. The interior was warm, blessedly impossibly warm. Heated leather seats, soft ambient lighting, the faint smell of new car, and something richer like aged bourbon and polished wood. It was the kind of luxury I had only seen in magazines, left behind on train seats, never touched, never imagined for myself. Luca lowered me gently onto the back seat. My legs wouldn't quite straighten. The swelling in my ankles had turned my feet into numb blocks. He knelt on the floor mat in front of me, knees on the carpet that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, and began unbuttoning his suit jacket with careful, deliberate movements. I stared at him, dazed. My mind couldn't catch up. One moment I had been kneeling in cake on a ballroom floor. The next I was here in a cocoon of warmth and quiet power being tended to by the man I had once accused of wanting to own me. He slipped the jacket off his shoulders and draped it over my lap, covering the ruined dress, the smears of frosting, the visible outline of my too-thin frame beneath. "You're freezing," he said, voice low and rough. "Your lips are blue." I tried to speak. My teeth chattered too hard. I'm sorry. Don't." The word came out sharp, almost violent. Then softer, broken. "Don't apologize. Not to me. Never again." He reached into the center console and pulled out a thick wool blanket, soft gray, monogrammed with a discreet M in silver thread. He tucked it around me, careful not to press too hard against my belly. His hands moved with the gentleness of someone who had once carried a terrified little girl through thunderstorms. Marco slid into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life. Luca stayed on the floor in front of me, one hand resting lightly on my knee through the blanket. Not possessive, not demanding, just there, anchoring. I looked at him, really looked, and the sight stole what little breath I had left. His fair skin was taut over sharp cheekbones. A faint scar curved along his left jaw, new since I'd last seen him. His gray eyes were bloodshot, shadowed with exhaustion, and something deeper, something that looked like years of sleepless nights. His suit, tailored perfect, was wrinkled now from carrying me. A small smudge of frosting marked the cuff of his shirt. My frosting. He saw me notice it. His mouth twisted, half pain, half self-loathing. "I should have been there," he said again, quieter this time. "Every night you slept on a park bench. Every morning you woke up hungry. Every time you cried alone because you thought no one cared. I knew. I had people watching quietly from a distance because you told me to stay away. But knowing wasn't enough. I should have come anyway." Tears burned behind my eyes again. "You respected my choice." "I was a coward," he answered simply. The admission cost him. I saw it in the way his throat worked, the way his hand clenched into a fist on his thigh. "I thought if I forced my way back into your life, I'd prove you right, that I only wanted control. But letting you go, it killed me every day. And tonight," his voice cracked, "tonight I watched a man humiliate the woman He stopped, swallowed, looked away. "The woman I never stopped loving." The words landed like a physical blow. Love. Not brotherly, not protective. Something fiercer. Something that had been waiting, burning in the dark all these years. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might break them. Heat flooded my face, my chest, places I hadn't felt warm in months. Suspicion clawed at me, old familiar defensive. Was this pity, guilt? A powerful man's need to fix what he couldn't save before. But when he looked back at me, when those storm-gray eyes met mine, there was no pity there. Only raw, aching need. Only fire. I felt it echo inside me, something long buried, something I had never let myself name. A pull, a hunger. A terrifying, beautiful thing. The Escalade pulled out of the loading dock and into the night. Streetlights streaked past the tinted windows in golden ribbons. We hadn't gone 3 blocks when Marco's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His jaw tightened. "West Side crew," he said quietly. "They're blocking the route at Michigan and Randolph. 3 cars. Armed." Luca didn't flinch. He simply reached for the console, opened a small compartment, and pulled out a sleek black phone. He pressed one button. "Rossi," he said when the call connected. "Clear the intersection at Michigan and Randolph. No lights, no sirens. Just make them leave." Politely, he ended the call. Less than 90 seconds later, Marco's phone buzzed again. He read the message. A small, grim smile touched his lips. "They're gone." I stared between them, heart pounding. The ease of it, the quiet, absolute power made my stomach twist. This was the world I had run from. This was the world that had just saved me. Luca turned back to me. His hand found mine beneath the blanket. His fingers were warm, strong, calloused in places that spoke of years of decisions I still didn't fully understand. "You're safe," he said. The words were a vow. I believed him. But belief didn't stop the shaking. He noticed. Of course he did. Without another word, he slid onto the seat beside me, pulled me gently against his side, and wrapped both arms around me, careful of my belly, careful of the bruises I hadn't yet admitted to. I stiffened at first, old instincts, screaming that closeness meant danger, that needing someone meant losing yourself. Then his heartbeat thudded against my ear, steady, powerful, alive. I melted. My head dropped to his shoulder. My arms came around him as best they could. I breathed him in cedar warmth, safety. Tears soaked his shirt. "I'm so tired," I whispered. "I know," he murmured into my hair. "Sleep. I've got you." Marco adjusted the rearview mirror, met my eyes for a brief second. His own were soft, gentler than I remembered. Ahead, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. Behind us, the grand lakeside ballroom shrank into nothing. I closed my eyes. For the first time in years, the cold didn't touch me. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion, beneath the shame, beneath the fear, a tiny, dangerous flame flickered to life. I didn't know what to call it yet, but it burned. The Escalade glided through Chicago's midnight streets like a shark through dark water, silent, unstoppable, unseen until it chose to be. I stayed curled against Luca's side, the blanket cocooned around me, his arm a steady anchor across my shoulders. Every breath I took smelled of him, cedar warmth, the faint metallic hint of the city night clinging to his skin. My body ached in 1,000 places. Ankles swollen to twice their size, back knotted from months of sleeping on floors or bus benches. Stomach hollow from too many skipped meals. Yet here, in this moving fortress of leather and quiet power, the pain felt distant, muted, almost bearable. I didn't dare speak. Words felt too fragile, too dangerous. If I opened my mouth, everything might spill out, the shame, the hunger, the fear that this kindness was temporary, that I would wake up tomorrow back in the South Side, walk up with the broken radiator and the eviction notice taped to the tour. Luca's thumb moved in slow, absent circles on my shoulder. I felt the tension in him, the way his muscles stayed coiled ready, even as he held me like something precious. His silence was heavy. Not cold. Wounded. Marco's voice broke the quiet from the driver's seat. 2 blocks ahead. Halsted and Division. They're waiting. Luca's arm tightened fractionally around me. How many? 4 vehicles. Black SUVs. No plates. West Side crew again, same ones from the dock. Looks like they brought reinforcements this time. A muscle jumped in Luca's jaw. His eyes flicked to the tinted window, scanning the night as though he could see through the glass and the darkness and the lies people told themselves about power. "Pull over," he said quietly. "Here. Now." Marco eased the Escalade to the curb beside a shuttered Italian bakery. The kind that had once filled the street with the smell of fresh cannoli when I was small. The neon sign above the door was dark. A faded for lease sign hung crooked in the window. Luca shifted, easing me gently away from his side. His hands lingered on my arms, warm, careful, as if letting go might break something neither of us could name. "Stay in the car," he told me, voice low and absolute. "Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone but me or Marco." I nodded, throat too tight to speak. He looked at me, then really looked. Gray eyes, stormy, searching, full of things he couldn't say yet. Guilt. Rage. Something deeper. Something that burned. "I'll be right back," he promised. Then he was gone, door closing with a soft, expensive click behind him. Through the tinted glass, I watched him walk into the intersection. Marco followed a step behind and to the left, flanking him the way they had always done since they were boys. 4 black SUVs blocked the cross streets, engines idling, headlights off. 8 men stepped out, dark coats, hard faces, hands resting near hips. The leader, a tall man with a shaved head and a scar running from temple to jaw, smiled like he'd been waiting for this moment all his life. Luca stopped 10 feet away. The scarred man spoke first, loud, mocking. "Moretti, heard you were playing White Knight tonight. Didn't know you did charity runs yourself." Luca didn't answer. He simply stood there, hands loose at his sides, overcoat open, suit jacket, still carrying the faint smear of my frosting. The wind tugged at his hair. He looked almost ordinary. Almost. But I knew better. The scarred man laughed. "You think you can just roll through our streets, pick up your little sister like she's a stray and walk away? This isn't your territory anymore. Times change." Luca tilted his head. "Do they?" A second man, shorter, broader, stepped forward. "We got word from the ballroom. Your sister's husband's got friends. Powerful friends. They don't like loose ends. And neither do we." Luca's voice stayed calm, almost gentle. "You have exactly 1 chance to drive away. Take it." The scarred man spat on the asphalt. "Or what? You gonna call your lawyers? Your politicians? We're not afraid of your name anymore, Moretti." Luca exhaled, slow measured. Then he reached into his pocket. Every man tensed. He pulled out his phone. The screen lit his face in pale blue. He tapped once, held it to his ear. "Rossi," he said. "Activate Protocol 7. Halsted and Division. All 4 vehicles. Immediate." He ended the call. Silence. Then far down the block, the streetlights flickered. Once. Twice. The entire intersection plunged into shadow. The scarred man's smile faltered. Luca lowered the phone. Your vehicles are now registered to a shell corporation with no ties to any of you, he said quietly. Your insurance has been canceled. Your titles are flagged for immediate impound, and the city just received an anonymous tip about modified exhaust's environmental violation. They'll be towed by sunrise. The shorter man cursed under his breath. And if any of you so much as look in my sister's direction again, he continued, voice dropping to something lethal and soft, I will take everything. Your homes, your family's businesses, your children's futures. I will erase you so completely that no one will remember your names. Not because I enjoy it. Because you touched what is mine. The word mine echoed in the night. It echoed inside me too. I pressed my palm to the cold glass heart hammering so hard it hurt. The scarred man stared at Luca for a long moment. Then slowly he raised his hands. Fine, he said. We're gone. They backed away. Engines started. One by one, the SUV's reverse turn disappeared into the side streets like smoke. Luca stood there until the last taillight vanished. Only then did he turn. His shoulders dropped just a fraction. Exhaustion carved deep lines around his eyes. He walked back to the Escalade, opened the door, slid inside beside me. The door closed. The world sealed shut again. He looked at me searching, almost afraid. Are you all right? He asked. I reached for his hand without thinking. My fingers trembled as they found his. He froze. Then his hand closed around mine, strong, warm, shaking just as badly. I don't understand, I whispered. Why now? Why tonight? He swallowed. His thumb traced the back of my hand, slow, reverent. Because I watched you stand in that ballroom, he said, voice raw, covered in cake, protecting your baby. And I realized I had spent 5 years punishing myself for letting you go. But the real punishment was yours, and I couldn't, his voice broke. I couldn't let it continue. Not for one more second. Tears slipped down my cheeks. He lifted our joined hands, pressed his lips to my knuckles, soft, lingering, full of unspoken things. I should have fought for you sooner, he murmured against my skin. I should have torn the city apart to bring you home. I'm sorry, Elena. I'm so damn sorry. The apology landed like a stone in deep water ripples spreading through every part of me. I didn't know how to answer. So I leaned forward just a little and rested my forehead against his. His breath caught. We stayed like that, foreheads touching, hands clasped, breathing each other's air, while Marco started the car again. The Escalade moved forward into the night. Behind us, the city lights blurred. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, something new was beginning. Something terrifying. Something beautiful. Something neither of us could stop. The Escalade moved through the sleeping city like a shadow slipping between streetlights, the engine's low purr, the only sound breaking the heavy quiet inside. I stayed pressed against Luca, his arm a warm cage around me, the blanket still tucked tight. My body had begun to betray me. Shivers that wouldn't stop, teeth that clattered. Despite the heat, a deep bone ache that reminded me how long I had gone without proper rest or food. My hands hidden beneath the wool looked like bird claws, thin-veined, trembling. I hid them deeper. Luca hadn't spoken since the intersection. His silence wasn't cold. It was the kind that builds pressure like a storm gathering over the lake. I felt it in the rigid line of his shoulders, in the way his fingers occasionally flexed against my arm, not holding me tighter, but reminding himself I was real. Marco's phone lit up again. He glanced at the screen, then at Luca, in the rearview mirror. First piece in motion, he said quietly. The ballroom. We own the management company now. Full acquisition closed 7 minutes ago. The hotel is ours. I blinked, slow and dazed. The words didn't make sense at first. Own. The Grand Lakeside Ballroom, the place where I had just been publicly dismantled, was now theirs. Luca exhaled through his nose. Good. Tell the staff to clear the building. No one leaves until we say so. Marco nodded, thumb flying across the screen. I turned my face into Luca's shoulder, whispering so softly I barely heard myself. You bought it. Just like that, he looked down at me. The streetlights passing overhead carved harsh shadows across his fair features, making the remorse in his eyes look almost violent. Not just like that, he said. But yes. Quickly. I swallowed. The disparity hit me again, harder this time. I had spent the last 3 winters choosing between heat and groceries. I had once walked 6 miles in the snow because bus fare was a choice I couldn't make, and Luca had just purchased an entire luxury hotel in the time it took me to draw a breath. The thought made me dizzy. My head swam. I gripped his sleeve to steady myself. He noticed immediately. His free hand came up, cupping the back of my neck, gentle grounding. Breathe, he murmured. Slow. I tried. The air felt too thick, too rich. Marco spoke again. Next. Vinny's primary lender, the private equity firm holding the majority of his development loans. They received the packet 30 seconds ago. Fraud documentation, tax discrepancies, the forged signatures you kept, Elena. They're all there. My stomach lurched. I had kept those papers hidden in the lining of an old coat I no longer owned because some small, stubborn part of me had still wanted to protect Vinny. Even after everything, even after the nights he left me alone with nothing but a $20 bill and a locked door, even after he told me the baby was my problem, not his, now those same papers were weapons. Luca felt me tense. His thumb stroked the side of my neck, slow, soothing circles. You didn't have to give them up, he said quietly. You could have burned them. I would have found another way. I shook my head against his shoulder. I wanted him to pay, I whispered. The admission tasted like ash and relief. I wanted him to feel small. Luca's breath caught, his hand stilled. Then he pressed his lips to the crown of my head, brief, fierce, full of things he still couldn't voice. The car slowed. Marco glanced back. Another roadblock. Clark and Kinsey. 3 vehicles this time. They're not backing down. Luca's expression didn't change. But I felt the shift in him, the quiet storm gathering force. He reached for the console again, opened the same hidden compartment. This time he pulled out a small black device, sleek matte, no markings. Signal jammer, he said, answering my unspoken question. They won't be calling for backup. He activated it with a soft click. The Escalade rolled forward. Through the windshield, I saw the 3 SUVs' engines running headlights off, men stepping out into the street. One held a bat loosely at his side. Another spoke into a radio. Luca opened his door before the car had fully stopped. Stay, he told me again. I clutched the blanket tighter. He stepped out into the cold October night. Marco followed. I watched, heart in my throat, as Luca approached the group. No hurry, no fear, just that same terrifying calm. The man with the bat stepped forward. You're trespassing, Moretti. This is our street tonight. Luca stopped 3 feet away. You're blocking my route, he said simply. The man laughed short, harsh. Your route? You think you still own Chicago. Your sister's little drama in the ballroom has people talking. People who don't like loose ends. Luca tilted his head. Then let me make this clean. He lifted the jammer slightly enough for them to see. Your phones are dead. Your radios are dead. Your vehicle's GPS just went dark. And right now, every traffic camera on this block is looping footage from 3 hours ago. The men shifted. Uneasy. Luca continued, voice low, almost conversational. In approximately 4 minutes, Chicago PD will receive a priority alert, suspected stolen vehicles matching your descriptions. They'll arrive with lights and questions. You can explain yourselves then. Or you can leave. Your choice. Silence stretched. The man with the bat looked at his friends. Then slowly he stepped back. They retreated. Engines started. They disappeared down a side street. Luca returned to the car. His cheeks were flushed from the cold. His breath fogged the air as he slid in beside me. He looked at me, searching my face, as though afraid I might have disappeared in the 30 seconds he was gone. I reached for his hand again. My fingers were ice. His were fire. You're shaking, he said. So are you, I whispered. He didn't deny it. Instead, he pulled me closer, careful of my belly, careful of my fragility, and rested his chin on top of my head. Marco started driving again. The city slipped past dark storefronts, glowing billboards, the endless black ribbon of the lake. Luca spoke against my hair voice, barely audible. I'm going to take everything from him, he said. Not because I want revenge. Because he made you believe you deserved nothing. And I can't. His voice cracked. I can't live with that. I closed my eyes. Tears slipped free. I didn't wipe them away. I let them fall silent, steady onto the fine wool of his coat, because for the first time since the ballroom I wasn't crying from shame. I was crying from something else, something that felt dangerously, achingly like hope. The Escalade turned onto Taylor Street, gliding past familiar brick row houses that had once been my whole world. The streetlights here were softer, older, casting long, forgiving shadows over cracked sidewalks and wrought iron fences. The family brownstone stood at the end of the block, 3 stories of dark red brick tall windows glowing warm gold against the October night. It looked exactly the same as the day I had stormed out 5 years earlier, slamming the door behind me with a finality that had echoed in my dreams ever since. I stared through the tinted glass, heart stuttering. My breath fogged the window in shallow bursts. My fingers still thin, still trembling, pressed against the cool surface, as though I could reach through and touch the past. Luca hadn't spoken since the last roadblock. His arm remained around me, but his body had gone rigid again, the storm inside him gathering new force. I felt it in the way his pulse raced beneath my cheek and the faint tremor that ran through him every few minutes, like a man holding back a scream. Marco pulled to the curb in front of the brownstone. The engine quieted. Silence settled thick and heavy. Luca shifted. "We're home," he said quietly. The word cracked on the last syllable. Home. The word hurt more than I expected. I nodded, small numb. He opened the door and stepped out first, then reached back for me. His hands were steady as he helped me slide across the seat. My legs buckled the moment my feet touched the pavement. The cold concrete bit through the thin soles of my flats. I swayed. Luca caught me instantly, arms around my waist, careful of the baby, holding me upright with effortless strength. "I've got you," he whispered again. The same promise. The same quiet desperation beneath it. Marco came around the other side, eyes scanning the street out of habit. He opened the front door of the brownstone with a key from his pocket. The lock clicked softly, familiar, intimate, like a memory I had tried to bury. We stepped inside. The foyer smelled of polished wood, fresh coffee, and the faint trace of rosemary from the kitchen. The chandelier, overhead antique crystal, always kept sparkling, cast gentle prisms across the marble floor. Everything was the same. The same Persian runner. The same framed photographs on the wall, me at 7, gap-toothed and laughing. Luca and Marco flanking me on my high school graduation day. Mama and Papa smiling in the old garden out back. My knees gave again. Luca caught me before I fell. He lifted me fully this time, bridal carry effortless, as though I weighed nothing at all. I buried my face in his neck, hiding the fresh tears. He carried me through the foyer, past the staircase, into the living room. The fireplace was lit, low flames dancing behind the screen. Warmth washed over me like a tide. I hadn't felt true warmth in so long, I almost cried out from the shock of it. Luca lowered me onto the deep leather sofa, the one where we used to watch movies on Sunday afternoons. He knelt in front of me again, pulling the blanket higher, tucking it around my shoulders. Then he saw it. Mrs. Carmela Russo, Vinny's mother, stood in the arched doorway. She wore a simple navy robe over silk pajamas, silver hair loose around her shoulders. Her face was pale. Her eyes, sharp, always sharp, were red-rimmed. She had come here. Somehow. After everything. Luca rose slowly. His body went taut. "Mrs. Russo," he said. No warmth. No threat. Just fact. She ignored him. Her gaze fixed on me. I shrank into the sofa cushions. Shame flooded me again, hot, suffocating. I looked down at my ruined dress. The smears of frosting now dried into crusty patches, the way my arms looked like sticks beneath Luca's jacket. Carmela stepped forward. Her slippers whispered across the rug. She stopped in front of me. For a long moment, no one moved. Then she spoke, voice low, trembling with something raw. "I saw what he did to you." My throat closed. She continued. "I stood there, in my own birthday ballroom, and I watched my son humiliate the woman carrying my grandchild. I watched him laugh. I watched the room laugh. And I did nothing." Her voice cracked. "I did nothing," she repeated, "because I thought family meant loyalty. Even when it's wrong. Even when it's cruel." She reached out slowly and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, soft, manicured. Mine were ice. "I was wrong," she whispered. "You are my daughter-in-law. You are carrying my blood. And I let you stand there alone." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I disown him," she said. The words came out fierce and final. "Vincent is no longer my son. Not tonight. Not ever again." The room spun. I stared at her, shock, numbing everything else. Luca's hand found my shoulder, steadying me. Carmela looked up at him. "You were right about him. All those years ago." "I didn't listen. I'm sorry." Luca's jaw worked. He gave a single curt nod. She turned back to me. "I want to stay," she said softly. "Not to fix anything. Just to be here, if you'll let me." I couldn't speak. My lips trembled. I nodded, small, broken. She leaned down, pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. Then she straightened, wiped her eyes, and walked out, quiet, dignified, carrying her own grief. The silence that followed was deafening. Luca exhaled, shaky, ragged. He sank onto the sofa beside me. His head dropped into his hands for a moment, shoulders shaking. Then he lifted his face, eyes red, voice hoarse. "I have something else to show you." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, folded piece of paper, yellowed, creased. He handed it to me. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. It was a photograph. Me, 16 years old, laughing hair wild in the wind, standing on the lakefront with Luca beside me, his arm around my shoulders, His smile rare, real unguarded. On the back, in my own teenage handwriting, Luca promised he'd always protect me. I believe him. I stared at it. Tears blurred the image. I kept it, he said quietly. Every day. In my wallet. Even when you hated me. Even when you left. I kept it because I never stopped believing I'd get the chance to keep that promise. My chest heaved. I looked up at him, really looked, and saw it. The love. Not brotherly, not protective, burning, desperate, all-consuming. It had been there all along, hidden beneath guilt, beneath duty, beneath the walls he had built to survive. Now the walls were crumbling. I reached up, touched his cheek. His eyes closed. He leaned into my palm like a man starved. Elena, he whispered. The name sounded like a prayer. I didn't think. I leaned forward. Our foreheads touched again. This time neither of us pulled away. The fire crackled softly. The city hummed outside. And in that quiet, stolen moment, something inside me cracked open, wide, painful, beautiful. I didn't know what came next. But I knew one thing. I wasn't running anymore. The fire in the hearth had burned low, casting long, wavering shadows across the living room walls. The room smelled of cedar smoke and the faint trace of rosemary that always lingered in this house, like memory itself had taken root in the plaster. I sat on the deep leather sofa, still wrapped in Luca's overcoat, and the thick wool blanket, my bare feet tucked beneath me. My toes curled against the softness of the rug, real wool hand-knotted, the kind of luxury I had once walked past in store windows and never dared to touch. My body hurt in ways I hadn't let myself notice until now. Every joint ached. My back throbbed in deep, rhythmic pulses. Hunger gnawed at my stomach like a living thing, sharp, insistent, familiar. I had lived with it for so long it had become background noise, like the wind rattling the windows of abandoned buildings where I'd sometimes slept. But here in this warm, quiet room, the contrast was unbearable. The hunger felt louder, more humiliating. Luca sat beside me, not touching but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His elbows rested on his knees, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles stood white against his fair skin. He stared into the dying flames as though they held answers he couldn't find anywhere else. Marco had left us alone, quietly slipping out to make calls to handle whatever came next. The house was silent except for the soft crackle of embers and the occasional creak of old wood settling. I couldn't look at Luca. Not fully. Every time I tried, shame flooded me again, hot choking. I saw myself as he must see me, thin to the point of frailty. Skin pale and sallow. Dark circles carved beneath my eyes from months of broken sleep on bus station benches and shelter cots. My hair hung limp and unwashed. My dress, once navy, now ruined beyond recognition, clung to me like defeat. I whispered so softly I wasn't sure he heard, "I'm sorry." Luca's head snapped up. "Don't." The word came out rough, almost angry, then softer, broken. "Please don't apologize. Not to me." I swallowed. My throat felt raw. "I left you. I screamed at you. I said I didn't need you. I said you were controlling me. And then I chose him." Luca closed his eyes. His jaw worked. When he opened them again, they were wet, shining in the firelight. "I let you go," he said. The confession sounded like it cost him everything. "I stood in that kitchen and watched you walk out. I could have stopped you. I could have begged. I could have locked the damn door. But I thought if I forced you to stay, I'd prove every fear you had about me right. That I only wanted to own you. That I only wanted control." He laughed, short, bitter, without humor. "So I gave you freedom. And freedom nearly killed you." A tear slipped down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, ashamed of it. Luca saw. Of course he saw. He shifted closer, slowly, carefully, and took my hand between both of his. His palms were warm, rough in places from years of decisions I still only half understood. My hand looked tiny inside, his fragile, almost childlike. "I watched," he said, voice low, raw, "not every day, but enough. I had people, quiet ones, who told me when you were sleeping on benches in Grant Park, when you sold your mother's necklace for vitamins, when you walked 6 miles in a snowstorm because you couldn't afford the bus. Every report felt like a knife. Every one. And I did nothing because you told me to stay away." His fingers tightened around mine, not hard but desperate. "I hated myself for it," he whispered. "I still do." I looked at him, then really looked. The man who had once carried me on his shoulders through crowded street fairs. The man who had sat up all night when I had pneumonia at 12. The man who had built an empire of shadows and power, so no one could ever hurt his family again. And beneath all of it, beneath the wealth, the control, the danger, was still the boy who had promised me the world when I was too young to understand how cruel it could be. I never stopped loving you, he said. The words came out like they had been torn from somewhere deep. Not as a brother, not just as family. More, always more. And I buried it. I told myself it was wrong. I told myself, you deserved better than a man like me, someone clean, someone safe. But tonight, watching you stand there, covered in that cake, protecting your baby with nothing left but your own body, I realized I couldn't pretend anymore. His voice cracked. I love you, Elena. I've loved you for years. Fiercely. Completely. And it's killing me that I let you suffer because I was too afraid to say it. The confession landed like a stone in still water. Ripples spread through me, shock, confusion, terror, and beneath all of it, something hotter, something that burned. I stared at him, breath-shallow, heart slamming so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. Suspicion flared, old defensive. Was this pity guilt? A powerful man's need to fix his mistakes. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, held nothing but truth. Nothing but pain. Nothing but love so deep it looked like anguish. I reached up slowly, trembling, and touched his cheek. My fingertips brushed the faint scar along his jaw. He leaned into the touch like a man who had been starving for years. I'm scared, I whispered. I know, he answered. Voice rough. I'm terrified. He turned his face into my palm. Pressed a kiss there, soft, reverent, lingering. I won't push, he said against my skin. I won't ask for anything you're not ready to give. But I need you to know. You're not alone anymore. You never have to be alone again. Tears came, then silent, steady, unstoppable. I leaned forward. Our foreheads touched. This time the contact felt different. Electric, dangerous, beautiful. His breath hitched. Mine did too. We stayed like that, foreheads pressed together, breathing the same air, hands clasped so tightly it hurt. The fire popped softly. Outside the city hummed its endless song. Inside, something long frozen began to thaw. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I didn't know if I could ever trust again. I didn't know if love like this, fierce, consuming, born from years of pain, could ever be safe. But in that quiet, fire-lit moment, I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. I didn't want to run anymore. Not from him. Not ever again. The fire had dwindled to glowing coals, leaving the living room in soft amber half-light. Shadows stretched long across the Persian rug, across the bookshelves. Filled with leather-bound volumes I had once dusted as a child across the antique clock on the mantel that still ticked with the same steady patience it always had. The room felt smaller, now intimate in a way that made my chest ache. Every breath carried the scent of cedar smoke, and Luca, his cologne, his warmth, the faint trace of the cold October night still clinging to his skin. I hadn't moved from the sofa. My legs remained tucked beneath me, blanket pulled tight, Luca's overcoat draped like armor across my lap. My body felt heavy, weighted down by exhaustion that went deeper than bone. My eyelids burned. My stomach twisted with the dull, familiar pain of hunger that had become as constant as breathing. Yet I couldn't close my eyes. Not yet. Not when every second in this room felt like standing on the edge of something vast and terrifying. Luca sat beside me, close enough that our thighs nearly touched, far enough that he still gave me space to breathe. His hands rested on his knees, fingers laced so tightly, the knuckles stood white. He stared into the dying fire, as though it might burn away the things he couldn't say. Silence stretched between us, thick, charged, alive. Then he spoke, voice low, rough, almost reluctant. There was a night he began before you left. Before Vinny. Before everything broke. My heart stuttered. I remembered. He continued, eyes fixed on the coals. You were 19. Marco had just come back from that trip to New York. We were in the kitchen late. You couldn't sleep. You came down in that old sweatshirt of mine, the gray one with the hood that swallowed you whole. You sat on the counter legs, swinging, eating cold pizza straight from the box. And you laughed at something stupid, I said, really laughed. The kind of laugh that lights up a room. His throat worked. I looked at you, he said, and I couldn't breathe. It hit me like a fist to the chest. You weren't my little sister anymore. You were everything. Beautiful. Fierce. Untouchable. And I hated myself for it. Because I knew God. I knew it was wrong, dangerous, impossible. I stared at him, breath shallow, pulse roaring in my ears. He turned his head slowly. Gray eyes met mine, storm-dark, raw, stripped bare. I buried it, he whispered, deep. I told myself it was just a moment, a mistake. I told myself you deserved someone clean, someone who hadn't spent his life in shadows. So I let you go. I let you run to him, and every day since then has been punishment. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. Luca reached out slow, careful, and caught it with his thumb. The touch lingered. His finger traced the curve of my cheek, featherlight. "I watched you tonight," he said. "Standing there in that ballroom, covered in cake arms around your baby, refusing to break. And all those years of burying it, they burned away. I can't pretend anymore. I love you, Elena. Not as family, not as protection. I love you the way a man loves a woman he'd die for. The way I've loved you since that night in the kitchen." The confession landed like thunder in my chest, shaking, deafening, impossible to ignore. My breath caught. My hands trembled. Suspicion flared, sharp, instinctive. Was this guilt speaking pity? A powerful man rewriting the past to soothe his conscience. But his eyes held no pity. Only fire. Only pain. Only a love so fierce it looked like violence turned inward. I whispered, voice small, cracked. I felt it too. His entire body went still. I swallowed. Tears burned fresh paths down my face. That night, I said, the pizza, the laughter. I felt you looking at me. I felt something, and I was terrified, because you were Luca, my Luca. The one who carried me when I was scared. The one who taught me how to throw a punch. The one who promised he'd always keep me safe. And I didn't know how to name what I felt. So I ran. I ran to Vinny because he was safe, because he was simple, because he didn't make my heart hurt the way you did. Luca exhaled, shaky, ragged. His hand slid to the back of my neck, gentle, reverent. His thumb brushed the sensitive skin beneath my ear. "I should have told you," he murmured. "I should have fought for you then. Instead, I let you go. I let you suffer. I let you believe you were alone." His voice broke. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so damn sorry." I leaned forward, slow, trembling. Our foreheads touched. This time the contact scorched. His breath fanned across my lips. Mine trembled against his. Neither of us moved. The fire popped softly. The clock ticked. And in the stillness, something long denied finally broke free. I lifted my hand, placed it over his heart. It hammered beneath my palm, wild, desperate, alive. "Luca," I whispered. He closed his eyes. A low sound escaped his throat, half groan, half prayer. Then slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, he tilted his head. Our lips brushed. Once, soft, tentative. "A question." I answered. I pressed forward, hesitant, hungry, terrified, exhilarated. The kiss deepened, slow at first, then fierce years of longing pouring out in the press of mouths, the catch of breath, the tremble of hands. He tasted of salt and smoke and everything I had ever wanted. His arms came around me, careful of my belly, careful of my fragility, holding me like I might vanish if he let go. When we finally parted, gasping foreheads, still touching tears, streamed down both our faces. "I don't know how to do this," I whispered. "Neither do I," he answered, voice raw. "But we'll learn, together." Outside, the city slept. Inside, something new was born, fragile, fierce, impossible to contain. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel poor. I felt seen. I felt loved. I felt home. The kiss lingered on my lips like a brand warm, searing, impossible to forget. We had parted slowly, reluctantly, foreheads still touching breaths, mingling in the quiet glow of the dying fire. Luca's hands remained on my face, thumbs tracing the line of my cheekbones as though memorizing me all over again. His gray eyes, storm-dark, glistening, held mine with an intensity that made my chest ache. Neither of us spoke. There were no words big enough for what had just happened. I felt dizzy. Not from hunger this time, though that was still there, a constant hollow gnawing, but from the sudden violent shift inside me. Years of walls, of running, of convincing myself I didn't deserve softness, crumbled in the space of a heartbeat. And yet suspicion lingered, sharp defensive whispering that this couldn't be real. That a man like Luca, wealthy beyond measure, powerful enough to bend cities, couldn't possibly want someone like me. Someone who had once slept curled in doorways to escape the wind, who had counted change for days to buy a single loaf of bread, who had learned to make herself small so the world wouldn't notice how little she had left. I pulled back just enough to breathe. My voice came out small, trembling. "What happens now?" Luca's thumb stilled. He searched my face, searching for fear, for regret, for any sign I wanted to run again. Now he said softly, "We take it slow. As slow as you need. I've waited years. I can wait longer." But his voice cracked on the last word. The restraint cost him. I could see it in the tension of his jaw, the way his fingers flexed against my skin as though fighting the urge to pull me closer and never let go. I nodded, small, uncertain. He leaned in once more, pressed the gentlest kiss to my forehead, then another to the corner of my eye, catching a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered against my temple. "Not ever again." The promise settled over me like a blanket, warm, heavy, almost too much to bear. We sat in silence for a long time, bodies close, hearts pounding in tandem. The fire hissed. The house creaked softly around us. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely, until Marco's footsteps echoed down the hallway. He appeared in the doorway, face grim, phone still in hand. Luca straightened immediately. What Marco's gaze flicked to me, brief, apologetic, then back to his brother. "Sophia," he said quietly. "She's out on bail. Somehow. And she's talking." My stomach dropped. Luca's entire body went rigid. "Talking to who? Reporters? Online?" "She's already posted a video. Doctored. Claims Elena seduced you years ago, says there are messages, photos, that the whole thing was planned, that you've been waiting for this moment to take over Vinny's life, that Elena's the real manipulator." The room spun. I pressed my palm to my belly, feeling the baby shift restlessly. Nausea rose, sharp, sudden. My vision blurred at the edges. The wealth around me, the soft leather, the crystal chandelier in the hallway, the priceless art on the walls, suddenly felt mocking. As though it were laughing at me. As though it knew I didn't belong. Luca stood in one fluid motion. The gentleness vanished. What remained was cold, lethal control. "Show me," he said. Marco handed him the phone. I watched Luca's face as he watched the video. Saw the exact moment, rage ignited behind his eyes, bright, consuming, terrifying. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Get the legal team," he said quietly. "Every platform, every outlet. Take it down. Now." Marco nodded. "Already dialing." Luca turned to me. His expression softened instantly, only for me. "I'll handle it," he said. "She won't touch you again." But I saw the conflict raging behind the calm, the violent need to protect warring with the guilt that he hadn't protected me sooner. I whispered, "People will believe her." "They might," he admitted. "Maybe too. But I've spent years building systems, quiet ones, powerful ones. By morning, the video will be gone. The story will be buried. And Sophia will disappear from public life. Permanently." He crouched in front of me again, knees on the rug, hands gentle on my knees through the blanket. "But you need to hear this," he said. "If the world turns against you, if they call you names, if they question your worth, I will burn every bridge they stand on. I will make them regret every word. Because you are not a manipulator. You are not a mistake. You are the woman I love. And I will not let anyone make you feel small again." Tears streamed down my face, silent, relentless. He reached up, wiped them away with the pads of his thumbs. Then slowly, deliberately, he leaned in and kissed me again. This time it was different, fiercer, more desperate. A vow pressed against my lips. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "I declare it here," he said. "In this house. To you. To the world if they force me. You are mine, Elena. Not because I own you. Because I choose you. Every day. Every hour. And if anyone questions it, they answer to me." My heart felt too big for my chest, swollen, aching, overflowing. I reached for him, fingers threading through his hair, pulling him closer. "I choose you too," I whispered against his mouth. "I'm scared. I'm broken, but I choose you." The kiss that followed was slow, deep, consuming. Years of longing poured into one endless moment. Outside, the city continued its restless hum. Inside, the storm between us quieted just for now. But I knew deep in my marrow that the real battle was only beginning. And this time I wouldn't face it alone. Months slipped past like quiet snowfalls over Lake Michigan. The bitter October winds of 2025 had long since softened into the gentle breath of spring, then summer, then the crisp promise of a new autumn. Inside the brownstone on Taylor Street, time moved differently, slower, warmer, healing. My son, our son, was born on a clear morning in early April. The private hospital room overlooked the glittering skyline, but all I saw was the tiny, perfect face cradled in my arms. He had Luca's gray eyes and my dark hair, a living bridge between two worlds that once seemed impossibly far apart. When Luca held him for the first time, tears tracked silently down his fair cheeks. He didn't try to hide them. He simply pressed his lips to the baby's forehead and whispered, "Welcome home, little one." Vinny's world had collapsed completely. The fraud charges, the tax investigations, the bigamy revelations, they buried him beneath sentences that would keep him away for decades. Sophia vanished from public life, her career in ruins, her name erased from every corner of the city she once thought she could conquer. I didn't rejoice in their fall. I only felt a quiet, exhausted relief that the storm was finally over. Luca and I married in late summer in the garden behind the brownstone. No grand ballroom, no 800 guests, just Marco, standing as witness Carmela holding our son, and a small circle of people who had chosen love over judgment. I wore a simple white dress, nothing extravagant but clean and soft against my skin. Luca wore a charcoal suit, the same one he had worn the night he carried me out of that nightmare. When he slipped the plain gold band onto my finger, his hand shook. "I promised I'd protect you," he said, voice thick. "I failed for too long, but I swear on everything I am I will never fail you again." I touched his face. "You didn't fail. You waited. That's harder than fighting." We kissed beneath the late afternoon sun, surrounded by roses and the soft murmur of family. No cameras, no spectacle, just truth. Life settled into a rhythm I had never known. Mornings began with the baby's soft coos and Luca's quiet footsteps bringing coffee strong black, exactly how I liked it. Afternoons were filled with Marco teaching our son to roll a ball across the rug, Carmela humming old lullabies while she rocked him to sleep. Evenings belonged to us, Luca and me, sitting on the rooftop terrace watching the city lights bloom against the dark. He would pull me against his chest, one hand resting protectively over my stomach, even though the baby was already here, safe, loved. I still woke sometimes in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced I was back on a park bench with only a thin blanket and the wind cutting through me. Luca always felt it. He would gather me close, murmuring against my hair until the panic ebbed. "You're here," he'd whisper. "You're safe. You're mine." And I was. But love like this fierce, consuming, born from ashes, did not erase the past. It simply made room for something new. One evening in late September, as the city cooled and the first leaves began to turn, Luca found me in the nursery. Our son slept peacefully in his crib. I stood watching him, fingers tracing the edge of the blanket, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. Luca stepped behind me. His arms came around my waist, gentle, steady. "What is it?" he asked softly. I leaned back against him. "I still can't believe this is mine. This warmth, this safety. I spent so many nights cold, hungry, believing I'd never have anything again. And now I have everything. Because of you." He turned me slowly to face him. His thumbs brushed my tears away. "You have everything because you survived," he said. "Because even when the world tried to break you, you protected our son. You kept going. I only gave you a place to land. You're the one who built this home." I searched his eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had once terrified me with their intensity, now softened with a love so deep it stole my breath. "I love you," I whispered. "Regardless of anything. Skin color, money, past mistakes, none of it matters. Love doesn't see poverty or power. It only sees the heart." Luca's throat worked. He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair. "And I love you," he answered. "Beyond reason. Beyond anything I ever thought possible." We stood there wrapped in each other, listening to our son's soft breathing, while the city hummed beyond the windows. Life lessons come in many forms, but the deepest ones are always the same. Knowledge, 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 knowledge is the light that guides us through darkness. Lesson, 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 lesson teaches us to rise again. Education, 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 education opens doors we never knew existed. To everyone watching this video, I wish you good health, a joyful life, and daily peace. This story, Shadows of Loyalty, is a reminder that true love doesn't care about skin color, bank accounts, or past wounds. It only cares about showing up, staying, and choosing compassion every single day. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the YouTube channel Alex Truths, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. We share powerful, heartfelt stories every day to remind us all what really matters. How did this story make you feel? Does it connect to something real in your own life? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one, and I truly want to hear the emotions from deep within your hearts. Thank you for being here with me today. Goodbye for now, and I promise I'll see you again in the next video. Disclaimer: all stories on this channel are fictional and created solely for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.